Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Barron Talks. I'm Dr. Ralph Ford, the Chancellor of Penn State Barron. My guest today is Laura Gunchen, the Vice President of Project Management at the Erie Management Group. Welcome here, Laura.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. And, Erie Management Group, what you do is quite impressive. You were founded in 2004 by Samuel Pat Black III. We all know him as Pat Black. And it really is part of his passion. It's his effort to encourage entrepreneurial growth in Erie and grow employment in our region. And the number of companies that you have is quite expansive. I'll just mention a few here. Hero BX, as we know well, the biodiesel producer, the largest in the northeastern United States. Prism Glass Recycling, which collects and recycles container glass in and throughout Erie County. And most recently, we all know about Calypso Enterprises, which grows and processes medical marijuana. So we have a lot to talk about today. You know, you grew up in rural PA.
I did.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your path to getting here to Erie and Erie Management Group, and you worked in some interesting positions along the way, for example, with one of our state senators. So tell us about yourself.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity again to be here. So, as you mentioned, grew up in rural PA, born and raised in Port Allegany, which is in McKean County, a tiny little postage stamp town. My athletic career took me to Lock Haven University. I played volleyball at Lock Haven for a semester and then decided that necessarily wasn't for me. I was more of a small town type of person, so transferred to Pitt Bradford, also in the Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference, like Barron. Spent a lot of time in Erie Hall, and I was sharing with Dr. Ford prior to recording that I was happy to walk past Erie Hall as it is slated for demolition as part of the next step in the campus. So happy to see that today. I actually came to Erie to go to graduate school at Mercyhurst. I have a master's degree in administration of justice. And then shortly after that, my graduate assistantship was at the Children's Advocacy Center in Erie. It was an office with a phone and a desk at that time and a really grand vision. And I was fortunate enough to basically have carte blanche to grow the center and the position to what it is today. I spent over a decade there. Wow. Then I left when our former state senator, Sean Wiley, decided he was going to run for the office, ran his field campaign, and then did community affairs and public relations for the senator, where I spent quite a bit of time with you, Dr. Ford, and had the good occasion to meet Mr. Black and Sumi James Black, his daughter at that time. Mr. B, as I call him, always has an idea for something, and came to the senator's office with a number of them, one of them being a half-cent sales tax in Erie County that would then be used for a dedicated economic development fund. And I was fascinated by that his mind worked that way. Erie County being a home rule charter, it was a little bit more difficult to get that across the finish line, but it gave me the occasion to really get to know the two of them. Maintained a relationship with Sumi more so across the years, and then after the senator was not reelected, I received a call from Sumi that, in true Sumi fashion, was, "Hey, I need you to be at my conference table tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I was kind of confused by that. And she said, "Don't worry, I took care of it with the senator." And then it blossomed into a job offer and writing the application for Calypso Enterprises. And here we are today.
Wow, that's impressive. And, you know, Sumi is straightforward. There's no messing around, but
right.
she's very accomplished. So
yeah.
Said, be here tomorrow. I love it.
Correct, yes.
Well, we're going to get into all these great businesses, but you said something we've talked about in the past, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but yeah, you walked by as you came in today. The old Erie Hall
Yes.
is coming down, and I must say, visiting teams didn't like to come to Erie Hall. The fans were right on top of you. It was a small place, but I'm sure you won a number of games there as well.
We did. And the fans were right on top of you. I remember one of the fraternities sitting around the outside of the volleyball court, and they were loud in what they were chanting, and you just don't let them get in your head.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you did not.
Thank you.
So your background, it's criminal justice.
Yes.
And you started out working for a state senator, but what you're doing here is so completely different. Mm-hmm. What skill, what makes you successful in this role doing so many different things?
Adaptability, versatility, and for me, first and foremost, is teamwork. You have to understand that you're not going to know the answer to every single question, but having the confidence to ask the question and to find the people that do and to learn from them. It may sound cliche, but I am literally learning something every single day. and then it's taking a moment to step back and reflect on that. So for students coming out of the university, it's being able to wrap their arms around something that is uncomfortable to them, that they may not have a good working knowledge, but they have the desire to learn, right? So for me too, it was, I have this really nebulous project where I don't know where to start. Or I have this concept with which I'm struggling and I don't know how to chunk it down. But the old adage of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time,
Yes.
It really does ring true, even though it sounds very cliche. It really does ring true that it's finding the area where you are comfortable and then working out from there. So adaptability is key. And I have a tendency as a type A personality to get into my own little rabbit holes, to do the same thing in the same order because that's where I'm comfortable. So it's getting outside of that comfort zone and knowing that if I make my to-do list for today and I walk into the office or I don't even get there and it's already all blown to pieces, that my day is not completely blown to pieces, right? So it's that being able to think on my feet and the adaptability and being a lifelong learner. Like I'd love to go back to school. I'd love to go to law school if somebody else would pay for it. That'd be great, right? I don't want to be saddled with that debt, but being a lifelong learner, I think is incredibly important for your students to know that there is value in that you need to always be learning.
And I think students need to understand that they don't have to know it all. And with that comes some intellectual humility as well, to say, I don't know this, but I have to go learn it.
Yep.
Well, great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's switch back to Erie Management
Sure.
Group. As we already said, you have a very broad portfolio of companies and products, from biodiesel to medical marijuana to real estate. So what's the common thread that brings all of that together?
That's an interesting question, and I think originally it was a focus on good paying jobs in the manufacturing sector, bringing Erie back to its manufacturing heyday with different industries. What it has become is taking an otherwise waste product and giving it useful life. So it's this transformation in that regard. So if you think about, we take used cooking oil and we turn it into fuel. We take used soybean oil and we turn it into fuel. We take a plant that is, for all intensive purposes, an outcast, and we turn it into alternative medicine. We take loose bottles and jars that otherwise are cast aside, and we turn them into a manufacturing input. So that really, over time, is what it has become. Whereas it was intended to be, and still is, good paying jobs in the manufacturing sector, it now has an additional life to it.
And you've also taken real estate that's brownfield and helped
Correct.
to redevelop that. So
Correct.
that's the common theme. Well, in your role, you manage the requests that come in. So, I mean, if you go to your website, it's very clear that Erie Management Group is looking for partners to invest in.
Right.
So that must mean that a lot of people knock on your door each year. So, what's it you're looking for when you meet with those companies?
Sure. So just
Or
to take
potential companies,
right,
I
just to
should say.
take one step back, if you remember over the course of the last couple years, Mr. Black had kind of pivoted those requests into the Idea Fund. He had started the nonprofit, which was for very early stage entrepreneurs to give them financial incentive to get to that next level. So it runs the gamut of folks with just an idea on paper to those who have matriculated all the way to a business plan, a functional product, some revenues, some debts. So it really does run the gamut in between there. What we look for is skin in the game, right? For lack of a better analogy. Somebody who understands that they're in for a large challenge and getting that idea to market, and they're willing to do that they have personally invested, whether that's time or capital, into that idea. Oftentimes we get ideas that are really not going to go anywhere. And that's a difficult conversation to have with somebody, that the idea that you've worked on for a number of years, in some cases, really isn't marketable. And here's why. Someone who has taken the time to understand the market, whether it's the regional market, the statewide market, or even the global market, sets them apart from the person who hasn't done that, right? They're already a step ahead in terms of how we see the viability of that concept.
Now, are you looking for people to come to you with ideas in a particular sector, or are you open to all ideas? So if anyone in the community has an idea, you're willing to talk to them?
we are willing to talk to them. If it's not something that fits into where we are currently with our own entities or, with how we feel about outside investment, then there are a number of avenues in which we would direct them in the community. And I hope that you would agree that the community itself more recently has become more aligned in terms of entrepreneurship. Whereas if you look back 15 years, there were so many silos that as an entrepreneur, you really didn't know where to go, or you went somewhere and it really wasn't your entry point. And I would like to say that over the course of the last 6, 7, 8 years that we've aligned ourselves as an economic development community to have a more streamlined approach for people looking to enter. We can always do better.
We can do better, but it has so significantly changed. And I mean, our part here at Barron has been the idea of the Innovation Beehive, which worked very closely with the IDEA Fund. And we're just partnered with the other universities. And the idea is to get people in, help. We focus on product design. We give them some business advice, but then ship them over to whoever they need to in order to move to the next step. There's a lot more venture capital in the region than there was. There's always a need for more, but it's completely different now.
Yeah. And I think the white paper that your predecessor and the other university presidents put forth was the genesis of that and really opened the community's eyes to, look, we can do better here. Right? And as a series of universities, we're not necessarily competing with each other. We can band together to provide an augmented approach with these folks because these industries and jobs are not always going to be here. And what can we do as the university community to shepherd that along moving forward?
It's interesting that you bring that up. Not a lot of people remember that paper that was written by the universities. But if you go back and look, and I've pointed this out to people, a lot of what was said in there has come to fruition. We have started digital tech gaming industry here in Erie. Not all just due to the universities, but for example, Matt White and his company downtown. Well, Matt was a faculty member that we brought in here to help us start our gaming program. What we've done with the McGee Women's Research Institute, all of those things were in that roadmap, or where they were in the thinking. And the narrative is all too often that we don't work together when the reality is actually quite different.
Right. And the reason I remember that white paper is because that was the time the senator was in office, and we, as an office, decided that we would write the governmental response to that white paper.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time
working on that.
Yes.
See, sometimes we think people aren't listening
Yes,
to us, and
indeed.
And in fact they are. So let's say, let's go back to the entrepreneur who walks through your door. What are they looking for? I mean, is it usually they're just there because they think they need you to invest, or are they looking for something larger?
I think generally they're looking for validation that their idea is worthy of investment, or that, sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, my family has told me for the last 3 years that I'm crazy. Why am I chasing this dream? Mm-hmm. Do you also think that I'm crazy? Should I be chasing this dream? So there's a validation aspect of it, I think, is key for folks. And investment. Mm-hmm. Mr. Black is known in the community as being a high net worth individual that has the ability to invest in startup companies. And I don't want to say that folks are necessarily looking for the silver bullet, but they are looking for guidance in those two realms. And then as well as what are my next steps? Where do I go next? Do you have any guidance in that regard?
I think that validation piece really matters to people because entrepreneurs usually are off the wall a little bit. That's why they're there, but then it turns into something that's mainstream or the product morphs. But what blind spot do they often have when they come through the door? What is it they don't see?
That's a great question. I don't want to say that there's a blanket blind spot for everyone, but there are some common ones that, and I've even experienced this myself, that when you get down a rabbit hole, it is very difficult to see outside of your path. Oftentimes folks put the blinders on, right? And sometimes it takes somebody who is completely unrelated to look at it through a different lens and to say, well, what about this? And then sometimes the light bulb goes off like, wow, I have spent 2.5 years on this project and I never saw it that way.
Yeah.
That's either viable or, that really doesn't make any sense. But as a common thread, being so laser focused on that specific thing that oftentimes running around with blinders on.
They often get enamored with their product.
Yes.
I've noticed, and this is pretty well known. And it's hard to know. It's just not easy to know how you bring a product to market. They don't know what the markets are. They don't know how to manufacture it. And They may have a great idea, but that always seems to be the big barrier.
And access to how much capital they need. I mean, I think that is an area where a lot of folks are a little bit naive, that they think that, oh, if I can get $150,000 seed money, I'll be golden for 5 years. Whereas they'll blow through $150,000 in seed money in 6 months
The
or
reality
less.
is they need 5 or 10 times that
Right.
amount usually, and they have no idea. And to do that, they have to give something. I mean, they have to give up some control, and that's really hard for them.
Right. I think the next common thread is having a cache of operating dollars that can sustain them for a lot longer than they think they need it. Right. I think that the industry standards is, oh, you need to bank 6 to 12 months worth of operating capital. You really need a year to 2 to 3 years of operating capital just to be comfortable. And if you don't end up using it, that's great. But it heads things off at the pass, like COVID, right? If you had 2 years or 2.5 years worth of operating capital, you could weather that storm. Now, it would be painful, but you could still weather that storm. But if you only had 6 months, I mean, you're closing your doors.
So are most of the companies that come to you, or the ideas, do they stay in Erie? I mean, is Erie a good home for their businesses? Do they have access to what they need?
Predominantly, yes. A lot of folks are local. Now, we do get inquiries for outside investment relative to the opportunity zone designation that SB3 has across the acreage, but mostly for product development or investment in an existing company, then they are local, and they do want to stay here. And their theme is, I grew up here, my kids are here, I'm doing this because I want to make a better future for my own children and my family and their friends, and this is my way of doing that.
Yeah, there's a strong community belief here by everyone
Indeed.
who lives here. And, that brings me to my next question. That's really strong in Pat Black. I mean, he believes in the future of Erie. What do you think motivates him? Why is he so focused on bringing jobs and companies here to Erie, Pennsylvania?
I think for him, he has the wherewithal to make lasting change. And it's not that he does it for a legacy. I mean, because you know him well, it's not about credit, right? It's about moving the needle. And he has the ability to do that. So other folks do not. So for him, having that ability is important and is the motivator, because he, as a high net worth individual, has the capability to invest back in the community and to grow the community. And his legacy is that he gets to pass that on to Sumi, and then she gets to pass that on to her children, and vice versa. And as they do that, it continues to snowball in a good way. That as we grow across the suite of companies, now to about 315 employees across 5 states, the next generation, the idea is to continue to grow that, right? So that's his motivator.
Yeah, and he really is so modest. It's amazing.
He really is. If you walked into a room and you were looking around for Pat Black, that's not who you would pick.
No, he's not
right?
going to come
No.
be the gregarious guy, but
No.
but when you get him going, he'll talk very passionately
Indeed.
about what exactly it is he's doing.
Indeed.
Well, as we all know, the partnership, the connection between the Black family and Penn State Barron is long. It is significant. You've made significant investments originally in the Black School of Business, and as we all know, a very large announcement just 2 weeks ago here on
Right.
campus that we all took part of, and that was the naming of Knowledge Center in our Knowledge Park. And it was a $3 million gift, for which the university is matching with $3 million to create a $6 million endowment. Wow, first of
Yeah.
all, we continue to be awed by the generosity, and a sincere thank you to you and the whole Black organization. And you were part of making that gift happen as well. But why don't you tell us a little bit, what motivated Erie Management Group, Pat Black, you, Sumi, to make that investment?
Sure. So Knowledge Park has become the nexus of activity, not only for campus in terms of its relationship with outside business and industry, but also the region. So the feeling was to further develop that nexus, right? The announcement of Trucklight coming here and the park being at, almost 100% capacity, then in Mr. Black's mind was, okay, what's next? Right? Does the park have the ability to expand? Can we do this on a broader scale? and at a higher level? And can my investment help that happen? Can there be another truck light situation? Can there be another industry-driven open lab concept like the Hero BX lab? So that's my take on his motivator, was to take the good work that has already been done and the roadmap that's already been laid and make it better, right? And continue that on.
And we had been, we'd had discussions with Pat for some time, but I think what was always clear in his mind, he has an affinity for manufacturing, he has an affinity for jobs, and he does have an affinity for the park. So this just made a lot of sense. And, what you said is very real. This will provide the capability for us now to take the park really to the next level. That's always cliche, but it does help us plan for a future that looks even brighter than it is. And, we have room to continue to develop the park. We're starting to look at far more significant plans. Of course, we've got to get truck light in the park. We've got over 22 companies right now. Erie Insurance is there. So we've had some really nice wins, but you're only as good as that, because look, as good as that is, we've got to take it to the next level. The Erie economy still has a lot more to do, a lot more growth ahead of it that we need to help drive, and we can as a university.
So for me, it's interesting to watch the partnership between academia and industry, whereas in the past, those two realms seem to operate independently and only came together, I don't want to say rarely, but didn't come together as often as probably should. And you talk about industry-driven education, right? You don't want a worthless degree when you spend however much it costs in tuition as a college student. You want to know that the education that you're getting is meaningful and is going to directly relate to emerging industry and industry that's going to be here in the future, right? And if you can, as a student, be part of that conversation, that's even more special. So for me, it was the relationship between academia and industry that was purposeful, not happenstance, was purposeful.
That has been a part of the culture and philosophy at Behrend. I would say for a long time. I've been here 27 years, and I think it's always been part of our philosophy. Certainly, we've grown it, and we've continued to with the development of the idea of the open laboratory. And it's not just always industry; it's community partners. So no matter what you're studying, whatever your degree program is, we want you to have some real experience working on real problems before you walk out the door. So everyone will say that. It's really hard to do in practice. I think we live that very well here, and that's part of the success. But it's not. I will tell you, it's not easy to do. You're marrying two different cultures in two different worlds, and each has its own set of values that are wonderful, but don't always match.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that Erie Management Group, Pat Black, yourself did that was really significant as well, was you were the first company to move into the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Center. And that was a real boost of confidence for us, and you moved your Hero BX Biodiesel Research Lab there. So why don't you tell our listeners, what's that lab about? How's it working? What's the value of having that lab in the park?
Sure. So Mr. Black has been known to say, and I absolutely believe with him, you have to diversify to survive as an industry. So the biodiesel industry has seen fits and starts of different product lines. And for Mr. B, it was important to be on the cutting edge of what that next application could be. Biodiesel is a drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel, basically one for one. So if you run diesel in your truck or in your car, you can run biodiesel in there with no modifications to engines or boilers in your home. So for Hero BX, it was, what are the other industries in which biodiesel is not an application that it could be in the future? Most notably the airline industry. If you can imagine how many planes are in the sky on any given day, they run on petroleum diesel. And if we as an industry can break into that marketplace, less carbon emissions. Oh my gosh, if you think about that, that aspect of it alone is astronomical. But then as an industry, it's an additional foothold to grow the footprint of biodiesel across the United States. So in order to do that, there are some challenges associated with taking a plane up to the altitude and the temperatures that are there. Diesel has a cloud point. It gels. That's why trucks are plugged in the wintertime when they sit in the garage. So that was one of the first things that the students, under the direction of Brett Burrell, the lab director, were charged with working on is analyzing the cloud point of biodiesel and getting it to a point where it would be more applicable in the airline industry. Number two, looking at different feedstocks and how to remove the properties that are unwanted in the feedstock so that we could be more of a multi-feedstock plant. So some plants only take one feedstock. We are a multi-feedstock plant, meaning choice fats and greases, soybean oil, used cooking oil, you name it, we can bring that in because we have the proprietary technology to handle that on the pretreatment side. Mm-hmm. So it has been absolutely remarkable having access to the students on campus, cutting edge technology, new processes and procedures, just them being such a sponge too has been fun for our lab director. And then that interaction with your faculty and your staff, being in the campus setting, having access to the directory for scholarly articles, having Dr. K on speed dial, right, to say, hey, Dr. K, we're thinking about this. What do you think? Just that collegial atmosphere of being in the park and having the students in the actual lab itself has been remarkable.
And for our listeners, Dr. K is
Dr. Kochalek, yes.
Professor,
yes, Dr. Kochalek.
Chemistry faculty
Yes.
member and director of the School of Science.
Yes.
Well, I will tell you, you made me think of something. When we started this initiative and Pat invited us down to talk about it, you think about that industry academic relationship, and Marty and team, we went down and we were all a little tentative. They were a little tentative about it. And I remember coming back and saying, no, trust me, we have the capability to do this. We can do this. And it's just been so great to see the whole process grow and what came out of those discussions and the people grow along with it. And the students, what the real value is, the students, they're on campus. They just walk up there,
right,
and they have the internship right here on campus, and they're making real contributions to what you're doing.
Absolutely, they are.
I'll tell you, whenever I'm up there, I do always just walk down, and I don't necessarily go in the lab, but I peek to make sure that, see what's going on. There's always activity. I've never really gone by and not seen some students and some of your employees working in there. So.
Right. And the lab is special to me because it was my first commercial real estate project from start to finish when I came to Erie Management Group. Wow. So the lab was the first of now what has been many, but there was lots of terminology where I was like, I now know what that is, right?
And what I've learned too, is every real estate project has a lot of twists and turns.
It sure does.
Each one is unique, but
yes.
You get them there and you've gained a lot of experience by the time they're said and done. Well, let's switch over to Calypso
Sure.
Enterprises. And Calypso is one of the few companies in Pennsylvania that has a license for medical marijuana.
Correct.
That's why Sumi, it sounds like that's why Sumi called you originally, was to say, I've got this idea.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that developed, because I don't think it was easy to start a venture like that.
It absolutely was not easy to start a venture like that. So Mr. Black, being very forward-thinking, went out into the cannabis space much ahead of the Commonwealth passing the Medical Marijuana Act, because he knew that when it finally got over the finish line that it would be a scramble, and he wanted to be ready for that. So he went to the West Coast, to California and Colorado, and had some very strategic conversations, and he found consultancy there, and we were ready. So went after the application in phase one, and I'm a firm believer that things do happen for a reason. We were not successful. It was a failure of mine on a very public scale, and one of those where you have to regroup and get better, faster, and stronger the second time around. And that's exactly what we did. So regrouped internally, took a look at the application, took a look at the applications of those that had secured the permits in phase one, and saw that we were deficient in a number of areas, and totally revamped everything, went after it a second time, and are very proud to say that we had the second highest score in the Commonwealth for that scoring rubric the second time. So Calypso is a wholesaler, meaning the license is to grow and process. So in our facility, it's from seed all the way through final packaging. In our industry, we call it seed to sale, right? Mm-hmm. So for us, it's from clone all the way through consumer packaging. And then under our license, we're required to transport that product as well. Our clients are the dispensary licenses across the Commonwealth. So there are 25 grower processor licenses. There's only one in our region. We're in Region 6. The closest one to us is Butler. And then there are a number in Pittsburgh, and then one to the east in Brookville that makes up, pretty much northwestern Pennsylvania. The dispensary licenses are 50 in total, but it's one license up to 3 locations. So 150 locations of the potential. We also are the only program in the United States that has a research component, and Penn State Hershey participates in that. We call them the clinical registrants. That's the name under the law, or the CRs. So under the clinical registrant licenses, there's the potential for a number of other dispensary licenses, or dispensary locations, excuse me. So we are at about 147, 48 locations. Calypso sells to all of them. So we have product in all those locations, from Erie all the way to Philly, Scranton, State College, and Pittsburgh. And Pennsylvania is a large state. It's 367 miles or something to Philly. So that's a long trip for our transport team. Especially when you have preclusions on loaded miles, that you can only have product in your van from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. That makes for a really long trip. So in and of itself, it was the first time for me personally that I had stood up a company. And I think I was a bit naive in that regard about just how much of an undertaking that was. But what I did have was a really good team. I mean, EMG is known for its high performance work teams, right? So it's having clear expectations for your team members about how to get where you're going. And every team has a captain, right? And my role was to be the captain of that team and to keep everybody moving to the finish line, because the finish line was not that long. The department wanted us up and operational within the first 6 months from the day that they emailed and said congratulations. We had a little delay there just because of building materials and lead times on some equipment. But to come out of the ground the first week in August and to be operational in June is
amazing.
It's quite a feat, right? And it absolutely was because of all of the strength across our teams and some really hardworking and very intelligent folks. So for me, it was not only the commercial real estate construction, but it was also creating all of the back office services, all of the operations, your standard operating procedures and all of your plans, and just how the system itself worked. Now, we had a roadmap from what we had written in the application, but it was putting meat on the bones of that roadmap, right? And I laugh sometimes, like, here I am, this desk jockey, telling these guys, like, okay, here's how we're going to grow this plant that I have very little exposure to, quite honestly. But it was one of those things where it became a living document, as any company should have. It didn't go sit on a shelf. It's the backbone of the organization, but it's seen a number of iterations in that regard, especially when you go and you live in a space. And I always say to people when they ask me about it, when you move into a new home, what's the first thing that you don't do? Start changing everything, right? Live in the space, because if you start changing everything, you might be sorry that you changed something that you didn't necessarily need to change, right? So living in the space was incredibly important when we went to build the expansion.
Second phase, yeah.
Correct. To only be in marketplace for less than 2 months and to know that in order to meet the demand we needed an expansion was an eye-opener. Demand was way outpacing supply at that time, and made it very lucrative and made it so that we had to expand in order to meet that demand. The expansion has been operational now since the end of April in 2021. We are growing and harvesting out of that expansion, and it's been pretty remarkable. We have about 120 folks on site. We're a little bit down in headcount where we should be, just relative to the expansion with the staffing challenges across a number of industries. We've not necessarily lost a lot of people, but we haven't been able to staff up to the level that we need.
Well, 120, that's a lot. So
that is a lot.
That's a whole new job growth here in Erie, Pennsylvania, which meets your mission. And to go back to, what you said personally to start that whole story, yeah, you had the sting of maybe failing the first time through on that first application, but nobody's going to remember that.
Except for me.
Except for you, a few, but you learned from it.
Absolutely.
And not only that, you built it, and then remarkably, I just want to make this point, within a year, you built an expansion and doubled the size of the facility.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story, and you didn't know anything about the business when you started.
Yeah. What's cool to me is the number of folks that work at Calypso and how broad their experiences are, from biology to chemistry to horticulture, people from plastics manufacturing, people from food manufacturing, people with business degrees. We have a couple guys that came out of administration at Walmart. It just is this cool amalgamation of folks that were really drawn to an emerging industry. And there is a whole lot of science that happens in the extraction process. I was just in the extraction labs yesterday, and I'm blown away by just the amount of equipment that's in there and the processes and how complicated those processes are. And you talk to the chemists. I mean, we have PhD chemists. You talk to them, and for them, it's every day. And they're like, "Oh, it's not that hard." They're so humble about it. And when you step back and think about that, it's remarkable.
Well, a simple question: what are the products that come out? Because you go from the grown plant to the product out the door. What are they?
Correct. So flour, which is what everybody's used to, right? So dry flour. We also have live products out of our extraction line. So we do both hydrocarbon extraction and CO2 extraction. So vaporizer cartridges. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you're not supposed to combust the flour. Smoke a joint, as colloquially as people reference it. You are supposed to vaporize per the regulations. So we have dry flour, we have vaporizer cartridges, we have a number of live products in terms of concentrates, which is a more complicated delivery method for probably a more mature patient in the program. That's not an entry point for a lot of folks. We do make a tincture. It's not something that we sell a lot of. But we do make a tincture, which is a sublingual application under the tongue, and then it's absorbed that way. We do not make them, but there are topical products in our industry, a lot of times for joint pain or inflammation. It pretty much does run the gamut in terms of product selection. Pennsylvania in the program does not allow for edibles, whereas other programs, more so on the recreational market than the medical market. So no brownies, no gummies, no lozenges, things of that nature.
Wow. And it really helps people with a whole lot of medical conditions.
It does. Pennsylvania's program has 25 qualifying conditions now, which is very broad. We have chronic pain, anxiety, and autism. Very few other programs have autism as a qualifying condition. Anxiety becomes a catch-all, and so does chronic pain, which is important for folks that are seeking relief that they could otherwise not find with traditional products.
Well, we've had a great conversation, and just hearing all of the different things you are doing, it is fascinating. I'll let you finish. What's next for Erie Management Group, and what's next for Laura Gunchin?
That's a great question. So for Erie Management Group, continuing on with the existing companies and being open to new opportunities. It's hard to tell what those opportunities will be, but they will be focused on growing jobs in the Erie community, lasting jobs that are good paying. What's next for me? That's also a good question.
I'm not suggesting you leave, by the way.
I am very happy where I am. I'm very busy, and I'm very happy. And to find Mr. Black and Sumi was like once in a million. So it's continuing on with the good work and seeing what comes across my desk.
Well, I'll tell you from the outside and from all the work we do with you, it seems like you have a great team that works very well together. So congratulations for all the great things you have done in the community. My guest today has been Laura Gunchin. Laura is the Vice President of Project Management at Erie Management Group. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.